I know what you did last summer. You were probably watching a better movie than this. What is up, guys? Welcome to my review of I Know What You Did Last Summer, the 2025 version, just to be clear, since these requels like to just recycle the same exact title. Now, to set the stage, I was a 90s kid, so I grew up in the era where these were my formative slasher films for the most part. Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, those were all kind of the big franchises of my childhood. And while I do have a little bit of 90s kid nostalgia for the first film, and even the second film to a certain extent, despite all its zaniness, these have never really been high on my list of favorite slashers. I think they're serviceable, but these movies have always very clearly been in the shadow of Scream, like pretty much all of the slasher franchises that rose to prominence in the 90s. They're trying to do some of the things that Scream was able to achieve, but never quite reached those heights and certainly did not have the staying power that Ghostface has had over the last 30 years. So when they announced that they were going to be doing a reboot or a legacy sequel for this franchise, I was always kind of up in arms with it. I'm like, is there a big demand for this? Is there really a lot of rabid I Know What You Did Last Summer fans that are just waiting with bated breath for the Fisherman to come back? What idea are you actually going to have to modernize this and bring some kind of a new spin, given how simple and how grounded and basic the premise for the original two films were? I just had a lot of question marks. And to be honest, when the trailer came out, it kind of affirmed all of my concerns, which is, this is just the same old shit with a modern look. And then all the early reactions started to drop, and much to my surprise, they weren't just positive, they were highly positive. Some people saying this is one of the best films of the year so far. Some people saying this is one of the greatest legacy sequels we have ever gotten in the slasher genre. One person who's a pretty reputable name that I believe is even ahead of a major critic organization saying that this is the perfect legacy sequel that the Scream films should have been but never really were. And so now I'm walking into this film much more hopeful, thinking, damn, maybe I shouldn't have counted The Fisherman out so easily. This would be a really nice surprise if this ends up being a hell of a legacy sequel. Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't agree. You know, that whole narrative that early reactions are full of shit and critics are paid off by the studios, this ain't going to help that narrative. So yeah, the basic premise for this 2025 requel is that you have a group of friends that go up to a windy road to watch the fireworks one 4th of July night, accidentally cause an accident that seemingly kills somebody, and then a year later they start to get nefarious messages and people start showing up dead, indicating that somebody knows what they did last summer. And if what you did last summer was struggle like most of us do, keeping up with our eating habits and our meal prepping, then check out the sponsor of today's video, Factor. We've worked hard all year to achieve that summer figure, but like a cruel joke, summertime is also the easiest time to get off track of your diet. Between carting my kids around to friends' houses and having to do yard work twice as often, there's not a lot of time left in my day to meal prep, and it's so easy for me to fall back on takeout for most of my meals. Well, Factor makes meeting your nutritional goals easier than ever with chef-prepared, ready-to-eat meals you can heat and eat in just 2 minutes. And you can continue to strive towards your summer wellness goals with options like keto, Calorie Smart, and Protein Plus. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success. Skip the grocery store, the prep, and especially the cleanup, and enjoy chef-crafted and dietitian-approved meals that are delivered right to your door. With over 35 different meals, there's a variety of weekly options that will never allow you to fall victim to food fatigue. Plus, you can round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with over 55 different add-ons, such as apple cinnamon pancakes or fruit smoothies. So if you're ready to keep conquering your wellness goals throughout the summer, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50CodyLeach to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50CodyLeach at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. And thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Starting off with the positives for I Know What You Did Last Summer. One of the elements of this film being a legacy sequel that I think it achieves more than most legacy sequels is that it really goes out of its way to pay homage and respect to the original film by bringing us back to some of those original locations, recreating certain things there, having a lot of winks and nods, both in a sinister way as well as more often a comedic way by the different characters. There's one line in particular from Ray in reference to the Bahamas that was the biggest laugh of the movie for me in my theater. And there's also an element to the movie where this town, Southport, and how it has moved on from the events of the first film that I thought was an intriguing angle. I kind of wish that it played a little bit more a part of where things went in the third act, but overall, having characters that were a part of that tragedy in 1997 and having a new group of characters dealing with their own tragedy and trying to uncover some of the events that have been stricken from the record, almost like Freddy versus Jason, we're going to erase the past. I thought that that brought a little bit of an interesting angle to the whodunit nature, where we're having to rediscover some of the locations and the elements and the characters of the first film like these younger characters are. So you're going on a whodunit route, but you're also kind of going down this trip of nostalgia at the same time. I think the sequences that we get here with the fisherman, they do a pretty good job at shooting it in a way where the fisherman has a very imposing nature to him as the villainous character. I've never found the Slicker to be the most intimidating getup. You know, he's not one of the more iconic slashers for me, but at least they do what they can with the sound design and with the way that they frame him as he walks in, and you're focusing on the boots and everything, where it really feels like this character is here to fuck shit up. I can't lie, while I wish they were utilized a little better in the film, and I'll elaborate on that, it does warm my heart quite a bit to see Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. back in this movie. I always enjoyed them back in the 90s, whether it was in this franchise or the other things that they were doing. You know, they're a part of my childhood, quite literally. So it was cool to see them have a place in this story that's not just a throwaway cameo, but what the scenes that we do get here, how they're revisiting these characters, slipping back into them, but also giving us a version of their characters that are very much different and changed and evolved or devolved from who they were when we last saw them. There's something interesting there. Again, playing into the nostalgia that, while I wish it didn't work so easily on me, it kind of does. And I will say this entire young cast here are a new group of characters. I think they achieved in doing what the director and the writer wanted them to become. I think they're exactly the type of characters that they were supposed to be, which is somewhat of a parody version of the characters we've got before, with a little bit of like a almost Gen Z edge to them. They're meant to be more comedic, a little bit more self-aware, borderline meta with some of their knowledge and how they're able to put certain things together. They're a much more stronger caricature of what they're trying to be than the characters in the first film, to a comedic degree. So I don't necessarily love the way they were written, but at the same time, I think the actors themselves did a good job at achieving what they were supposed to with these characters. Moving on to the mixed, even after seeing this film, and even just in the last 24 hours, kind of seeing some of the varied responses online by some people I know, some people I don't know, I'm still incredibly puzzled at who this movie was made for. In a way, it feels like it was very much geared towards fans of the first two films, and then in a certain way, it feels like it's almost a punishment to be a fan of those first two films and to walk into this. And it's meant to be for a brand new group of fans, but I don't think they achieve enough to really onboard new people with this film, or to encourage people that never watched the first two movies to go back and check those out after seeing this. And narratively, I don't even think that journey is going to work with where things go in this film. So I'm still very puzzled. You know, I don't want to declare that this is not for anybody, because it's just not for me, and that's fine. But there's just so many combative decisions here and tones and approaches that I really do struggle to figure out who this movie is for. And now moving on to the negatives. And the biggest one for me is that I do not think this is a well-written film at all, both on a story level and much more significantly in the dialogue department. The dialogue, I think, was horrible. I mean, from the first 10 minutes, I kind of slumped into my chair going, oh God, please tell me this is going to get better. Because even just in the first couple of scenes where we're getting introduced to these new characters, nobody felt like a real human being. And unfortunately, that carried on through the entire film. But every bit of dialogue that we get in the first act of this film is so tell, don't show, and is so on the nose exposition heavy that It just feels like somebody like almost narrating the movie through the mouths of these characters, where you're introduced to who ends up being one of the co-leads of the film, and she's trying on a dress in the mirror, and she's like, just stop. He's your ex-boyfriend, and you're just going to your other best friend's bridal shower. Just get it out of your head. And then we cut to the next scene, and it's her and her best friend going, hey, are you gonna hook up with so-and-so? I know you guys broke up, but like love is in the air. And then it cuts to the two guys, and he's like, hey dude, you know, she's there. You guys gonna hook up? Because I know you're on the rocks. And it's like, fuck, do you have to explain this to me 3 times in a row for me to get it? Right before the group of characters go off to, you know, what's eventually going to be the scene of the crime, they're introduced to yet another friend that they're on the rocks with, and the scene plays out like this. Oh my God, is that Stevie over there? Yeah, it's her. We really haven't been much of friends ever since that thing happened with her father a couple of years ago. I wonder if we should say hi. Oh my God, Stevie, is that your friends over there staring at you? Yeah, they're not really my friends anymore. We haven't really talked much since that thing happened with my father where he pissed away all of my college money and they got to go to college and I didn't. And so now we're kind of on the rocks. I wonder if I should go say hi. Like, I'm playing it up a little bit, but not by a lot. That's how we're introduced to all of the information that we get about these characters, is just having characters for no reason whatsoever give all this backstory and all this context in a way that is not a natural conversation whatsoever. And the writing just continues on that way, almost to a point where it feels like we're rushing to every single story beat in the movie. It's like they had bullet points of where they wanted the characters to be, what they wanted the characters to think, and the cause and effect of certain things, but they never stopped to actually develop natural, grounded ways to get from point A to point B. So every little bit of conversation, every little eureka moment by certain characters, they don't feel natural. They feel like they're just there because we need to get them to do this next thing. Even the big moment where the characters get the first note that says, I know what you did last summer, is ridiculous. Oh my God, guys, I got a note that says, I know what you did last summer. There's only 5 of us that actually know what happened last summer. And oh wait, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 5 of us here. So I guess the natural assumption is that that 5th person in our group that's totally not with us right now is probably just fucking with us, right? Like that's naturally the first assumption we should make. But wait, what if the person that we killed didn't actually die? And now they've waited for a year later, the anniversary, to fuck with all of us, and we're all in danger. What if that's what's happening? Seems a little fucking extreme of a leap there, but sure, we'll run with that one. And while I said earlier, I think the actors did do a good job at what they were directed to be in this film, the way that these characters are written, I just don't think makes sense for this franchise. It's too comedic and too self-aware. I mean, to the point where one of the lead characters, played by Madeline Klein, Danica, she's almost infantile to the degree of how childlike she is and how like ditzy and how oblivious she is to how everything works outside of proms. And so for a movie that's trying to take itself seriously in moments where it should, it's very much undercut by other scenes where it feels like characters aren't responding the way that human beings would respond to their friends and loved ones being killed off one by one, and them very much still being in danger's path. Like the number of times where everybody acknowledges there's a fucking psycho out there hunting us down one by one, and yet they're just chilling by themselves, drinking alcohol. It's like, huh? Hey guys, I'm gonna go to the gym by myself so I'm ready for this motherfucker when he comes for me. To hell with the gym. I'm just going to go sit in a sauna with a bunch of steam. I can't see anybody. By myself. Oh my God, guys. There is a killer after us. We all have to stick together. Nobody sleeps alone. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Well, I got to get to work. Oh, okay, cool. Have a good time. Everybody else, we have to stick together. And look, I already see the comments coming. What did you expect? These movies were never all that smartly written. What do you expect? It's a slasher film. The characters have to be dumb. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I fully reject that logic. So if that's the way that you think about these movies, you'll probably have a better time than I do. I think there's a line between acceptable stupidity and just bad writing, and this one very much crosses that line. For as much as I enjoyed going back to certain key areas and key moments from the original film and a couple of comedic nods to the original 2 films, there is some dialogue in here, namely the big moment from Jennifer Love Hewitt that, no, doesn't work.
What are you waiting for?
I mean, let's be honest, that moment from the original, the what are you waiting for, huh? Like, that's the most iconic scene from that film, but because it's been made fun of so many times. It's not like a badass, awesome final girl moment. it's pretty ridiculous. That's why Scary Movie had a fucking field day with that scene. So thinking that that moment is so iconic that you can just rip that line, stick it right back into this movie in a moment where you try to make it work and it's supposed to be this awesome hell yeah moment, it just comes across very cringeworthy. I also didn't think the movie was edited very well. It's very choppy, and just like with the script, it feels like we're in a rush to get from scene to scene. And, you know, it's not something that happens all throughout the film, but there's notable moments where you are so thrown as a viewer and you're so jarred by what scene just preceded what you're seeing now. Like, there's literally a spot where one of our characters is being attacked by the fisherman. Eventually, he gets the upper hand, kicks the shit out of the fisherman, stands over top of him and spits in his face, and then it hard cuts to that same exact character who was just standing tall and victorious over our killer, crawling up the stairs, clinging to a little bit of life, like, oh my God, somebody help me. And in that moment, you're like, what the fuck did I just miss? Like, there's something cut there. That doesn't work. Again, in the third act, where you have something pretty significant happen, and then you just hard cut to characters not really affected by it, just sitting around having a conversation, and you're like, that's weird. Unfortunately, a negative that I really didn't expect was going to be an issue with the film in 2025 is that I was not impressed with the kills or the gore. Now, like, there's one scene, one specific kill that was pretty decent, and there's one spot where you just see kind of the aftermath, like bodies being hung up for display. That was kind of gnarly, and in that moment, I was like, okay, more of that, please. But the movie really feels like it's trying to lean as close to PG-13 kills as possible while still very much being a rated R film, which to me makes no sense. If we're going to be PG-13, then be PG-13, and there's nothing wrong with that if you can still achieve the thrills and the tension. I don't think they really do, but if you can achieve that, cool, get more audience, that's fine. But if we're going rated R, what are you scared of? Throw in some fucking blood. Let's go. And so are the kills maybe slightly more intense or graphic than the first two films? Maybe, arguably, yes, no, but it's not enough of a difference for me to even say definitively that it is, which shows you how tame they really are. You know, this doesn't have to be Terrifier level, but for God's sakes, slashers in 2025, like, we can handle a lot more than this. Come on. Carnage me, baby. And outside of that, like, I associate I Know What You Did Last Summer more with the chase sequences than I do the actual kill sequences, which is kind of a unique DNA that is almost exclusive to this franchise. Like, everybody always talks about the Helen Shivers kill, but it's really the Helen Shivers chase scene that we all love and hold in this iconic regard. Why we didn't get any chase sequences in this film is beyond me. Like, to me, that's misunderstanding your own legacy in this franchise, because there's none of it. Like, every single sequence we get where the fisherman is attacking somebody, it's all close quarters. It's, you know, maybe a little tiny bit of chasing, but not enough to match what I definitely think is more of an important piece to this franchise than the actual slashing. But when you have a whodunit like this, what is arguably the most important piece of your story that you have to deliver on, otherwise everything else crumbles? The eventual third act reveals the identity of the killer and the motivation of the killer. And on both of those fronts, they epically failed with this one for me. Not only did I feel that the answers to those two questions was very unsatisfying, mostly because, yet again, not to be a broken record, the script writing doesn't do any of the actual work needed in the first two acts to properly set up and earn those answers by the end. But for how surprising and shocking they're trying to be with these reveals, they're incredibly obvious because they are so overt with their use of red herrings throughout the entire film, which is something that I would say about the first two films as well, but to a much more extreme degree here, where we get like 3 or 4 different characters throughout the runtime that are very clearly meant to be a distraction, that are very clearly put into this movie for us to go, ooh, they're kind of weird, I bet they're the killer. But when you're so overt with it, where they might as well say red herring across their fucking forehead, it doesn't work, because anybody who's seen more than one whodunit immediately looks at that character and says, they're being too weird. Clearly they're not the killer. And once you start to discard all the heavily overcooked characters from this movie and you're scratching them off of your little clue pamphlet, you're not left with a whole lot of sensible answers, and even if the red herrings aren't as obvious to you when you watch the film, unfortunately there is one sequence very early on in the film where a character reacts to the fisherman in a way that really gives away overtly who the killer is. I mean, if I wasn't already suspecting it at that point, that would have solidified it to me, where when they said it, I was like, why did you do that? Now it's obvious. And to wrap all this up, the last thing I will say, which I can't elaborate much on in this video because I'm trying to keep things spoiler free, is that I did not really care for the way that our legacy characters were utilized. Not only did I not really like the way that their story progressed from the first two films and who they are as characters, I wasn't given enough in this movie to understand the change in both of them from the last time we saw them to now. Like most of the rest of the film, the script just doesn't really do any of the heavy work there. It just kind of tells us this is the way that it is, and you don't need to understand why. I need to understand why. You know, this is not like a Gale and Dewey situation where it's very easy to understand why their marriage is continuously on and off again just because of who they are as characters. Julie and Ray were the two most level-headed and grounded characters in the group of people that we had in both of the first two films. So the fact that their marriage went so awry and they're at a point in this film where they literally almost despise each other, I need to understand that why. You just telling me that that's how it is, that's not good enough. I also didn't feel like Julie James played enough of a role in the actual action of what is going on. She's just there as an expositionary character, and clearly there's going to be plans for her in the future. If this is successful enough, they have to have those plans, and maybe we'll get that in another film if this succeeds. But I just don't understand why you would bring her back if she's not going to play more of an active role, if nothing else, in the third act of the film. I mean, if you thought Gale and Sydney showing up to kick ass in just the third act of Scream 5 was a disappointment, get ready for what you get here. I will elaborate on all of this more in a spoiler video that I will drop on Sunday, where I'll talk about how their characters were used, the reveals of the killer identity and the motivations, and how things played out in the third act, all that good stuff. So if you want to check that out, be sure you subscribe. We'll talk about that in a couple of days. So overall, guys, was this movie miserable? Was it unwatchable? No. Like, I have a lot of negatives, and I have strong feelings on my negatives because this was a massive disappointment for me, but it's watchable. It's a low-rung slasher, and if your taste for slashers, if your demands for slashers are pretty minuscule, you just want some funny characters, you want a killer that has some kind of an iconic look, as long as you get some kills on screen, you're pretty entertained, then check it out. You'll probably have more fun with it than I did. But if you're somebody that was a little puzzled at why we're going back to I Know What You Did Last Summer, and you really want them to do something to bring this franchise into a modern time and put some genuine effort into the story and the characters and try to do something evolved with it, that's just not this movie. It's a nostalgia trip that tries to reinvent the original movie, but does pretty much every single element of it worse than that original film, which the original in and of itself isn't something that I hold in that high of a regard. So there you go. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my playlist up here where I covered the other 3 movies in this franchise. Yes, there are 3, if you don't know. That third one they very wisely decided not to acknowledge here. But check those out, like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss that spoiler video on Sunday. And as always, guys, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.